All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. Hello and greetings from a surprisingly sunny Alaska. It's a very nice surprise. I was just telling David that we're breaking another record high temperature today. It's 55. So hopefully that gives folks a sense what Alaska's like this time of year. I want to thank everyone for joining us for another Wildlife Wednesday presentation with the Center for Wildlife Studies. My name is Jeff Stetz. I'm the Director of Science and Assistant Professor at CWS. One of my duties is to help coordinate this series, which we see as another way to help educate the public about topics on wildlife conservation, research, outreach, planning, and so on, while showcasing some of the amazing work that our staff and colleagues are involved with. It's my pleasure to introduce today Dr. David Shiffman, who is an interdisciplinary marine conservation biologist based in Washington, D.C., where he studies endangered species of sharks and how to protect them. I assume not in D.C. so much exactly, but his more than 70 peer-reviewed scientific journal articles have been cited over 2,500 times, and his public-facing writing has appeared in National Geographic, The Washington Post, nationally syndicated op-eds, and a monthly column in Scuba Diving magazine. He's the author of Why Sharks Matter from Johns Hopkins University Press, and he invites you to follow him on social media uh, at Why Sharks Matter, and I'll include some links during the talk or at the end of the talk, where he's always happy to answer questions anyone may have about sharks. So, of course, we're very excited to have David joining us today and giving his presentation entitled Why Sharks Matter, the Science and Law Behind Saving Endangered Sharks from Extinction. And with that, I will turn it over to you, David.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. I'm going to share my screen here. Jeff and Jackie, can you confirm that you're seeing slides? Great. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you for that introduction, Jeff. Thank you all for joining us on, for me, Wednesday evening. It seems like we have folks joining from all over the US and a few people internationally, so awesome. If I say tonight, I am referring to my time zone where I am in the DC area. So, as Jeff mentioned, I am an interdisciplinary marine conservation biologist, and I want to take a moment to explain what that means and how that, because it helps inform the sort of work that I do. Interdisciplinary means I don't just look at the fish. I also look at the human side of things. I look at what do people know about the ocean? What do people fear about sharks? What do people want from a conservation policy solution? Because after all, when we make a new law, it doesn't actually tell the fish what to do. It tells humans how to interact with the fish. And marine conservation biology is a little different than the traditional marine biology you might be familiar with. It is, instead of just looking at where do the fish go, what do the fish eat, it explicitly does that with a lens towards threats that these animals face and how we can use science to protect them. So it's a little more applied, even though it uses the same methods and often publishes in the same journals. I am teaching two different courses with the Center for Wildlife Studies this fall. One is biology and ecology of sharks and their relatives, which I saw a couple people in the chat said they're enrolled in. Awesome. There's both an online asynchronous lecture component of that class and an optional 3-day field experience where you will spend 3 days with me living on a research vessel in South Florida, working with real sharks with my research team. I believe they we have two offerings of that. In November, they have both filled up, but there is a wait list, and we're trying to offer a third section that will probably be in February or March, so stay tuned for that. And there will be links shared for how you can register for that later in the chat. The other course that I will be teaching is public science engagement using social media. In addition to giving public talks and my public-facing writings, I'm also one of the most followed scientists in the world on social media. Indeed, that's how many of you are saying in the chat you learned about this talk. And I am teaching a masterclass in how to use emerging social media tools to communicate science to the public. It is still possible to register for both of these courses, though I believe the early bird pricing just expired. So in addition to all that sciencey stuff, I'm a person, and I'm a person who loves sharks and has loved sharks for a really long time. And tonight I want to explain to you some of the reasons why I love sharks so much, and some of the things I've learned in a career of studying them, and some of the reasons they've held my attention for so long. And in doing so, I'll introduce to you some of the key themes of my book, Why Sharks Matter, and some of the topics that we'll be discussing in my Center for Wildlife Studies course. I'll also highlight some of my interdisciplinary research throughout. At the end of this talk, I am happy to answer any questions that you want to know about sharks, about marine biology, about ocean conservation, about me, anything that you want to know. I do an Ask Me Anything on social media every week, which means it is extremely unlikely that the weirdest question you can think of is the weirdest question I've ever been asked. So happy to answer literally anything at all. I just ask that you please hold questions till the end of the talk. So, one of the things that I absolutely love about sharks and is still fascinating me every day, there was a new amazing discovery about this even just today, is that sharks are weird and really different from other groups of animals, and where they have amazing abilities, they have amazing biological features, and they have amazing behaviors, and we're learning new things all the time. If this starts on the inside, sharks do not have bones. Their skeletons are made entirely out of cartilage, and that's indeed what separates them from other groups of fishes. They are indeed fish. They are not mammals. They are not half fish, half mammals. They are not their own thing. Sharks and their relatives are fish, but they are a different group of fish. Having a skeleton made out of cartilage has advantages and disadvantages. One advantage is it's very light and it's very flexible and it heals relatively quickly. But one disadvantage is when sharks are out of the water, their organs aren't supported and the body can get crushed. So sharks are very well adapted as long as people don't get involved. Sharks also have a whole other sense that we don't have at all. I don't just mean they can see better than we can or smell better than we can, though they can. I mean they have a whole way of perceiving the world that we do not have at all. They can sense electromagnetic fields. A couple years ago, I got to write an obituary for the scientist who discovered this, which you can read online in American Scientist magazine. But let me tell you why it's helpful to be able to sense electromagnetic fields if you're a predator. Well, if we are hunting for our dinner and it's hiding under sand or mud, we can't see it, we can't hear it, we can't smell it. So we would go hungry because we can't find food. But sharks know it's there because they can sense the electricity, the electromagnetic field given off by their beating heart and contracting muscles, which is just awesome. They also use this ability to navigate in the open ocean. There are many, many, many more shark species than most people have heard of, and they come in a shockingly wide variety of shapes, sizes, and habitats. Pretty much anywhere that's wet, you can find sharks. The U.S. Navy SEALs have a saying that if you want to know if there are sharks in the water near you, you dip your finger in the water and taste it, and if it's wet, you're in the ocean and there are sharks near you. And that's true, but it's incomplete because there are lots of shark species that live in rivers and even lakes. There are most people, when they think of a shark, they think of a great white shark or something that's sort of that typical shark body plan. But as you can see in these photos, there's a wide range. In the lower right, that's the American pocket shark. It is not called that because it's small enough to fit in your pocket, though it is. It is called that because of that little pocket of flesh behind its eye, which is full of glow-in-the-dark liquid that they can squirt on command to startle away predators. In the lower left, that's a megamouth shark, a deep sea weirdo that was discovered when a U.S. Navy vessel off Hawaii hit one with their anchor. We had no idea that this existed until the 1970s, and there have been fewer than 60 of them ever seen by humans. In the center, you have an angular rough shark. It's the most recent new species of shark that I've seen. I keep a running list of the shark species I've seen. Angular rough shark was 57. And people usually think of sharks as being sleek, powerful, athletic, fast animals. Not so with the angular rough shark. As you can see from their body plan, you can picture an overinflated football with the wrong size dorsal fin attached, and you're well on your way to an angular rough shark. The top center, that is not an eel, that is a frilled shark, an ancient species that moves by undulating its entire body, not just its tail. So there's an absolutely wondrous variety of shark species, and that's also true of their behaviors. In the lower right, that's a goblin shark. Lots of animals can hyperextend their jaws like that. Snakes do this, but nothing does it as fast or as far as a goblin shark That video is slowed down 100 times so you can see what's happening. When it's not slowed down, there's just a fish in front of its face, and then there isn't. In the upper right, that's a Greenland shark, and that video is not slowed down. That is the cruising speed of the adult Greenland shark, the slowest moving large vertebrate on Earth. But they're in no particular hurry because they can live to be over 400 years old. They live under Arctic ice and have been found with prey items in their stomach, including polar bears and reindeer. On the left, that is a kitefin shark, the largest of the shark species, whose whole bodies glow in the dark. There's a whole group of these. They're called lantern sharks. And my favorite lantern shark is the ninja lantern shark. It is called that because my friend who discovered it around Thanksgiving and was home with her family. And everyone was talking about what's new at school, what's new at work. And she said, well, I discovered a new species of shark and I get to name it whatever I want. And her young cousin runs into the room and says, ninjas are cool, call it the ninja shark. So she did. There are new species of sharks being discovered all the time. On average, somewhere in the world, there's a new species of shark, skate, ray, or chimera. Those are the other cartilaginous fish discovered about every 2 weeks. Where baby sharks come from is also a source of biological fascination, and it's again wondrously diverse. Some species of sharks give live birth. What you're seeing up there is a lemon shark giving live birth. A baby shark is born. It immediately has to just be a little shark and take care of itself uh, because sharks have no parental care at all. Some sharks lay eggs. If you've heard of a mermaid's purse, that's a shark or skate egg case. Some sharks have a weird mix of this that's only found in sharks, where the babies hatch within eggs inside the mom and then spend their last few weeks developing and then are born live. Some sharks can essentially clone themselves. If there's not a suitable daddy shark around, the females can just become pregnant, and instead of the babies being a mix of the DNA of mom and dad, they are just genetic copies of the mom. So there's always something new to learn about sharks. It's one thing, so that's easy to hold my attention and fascination for so long. But when most people think about sharks, they think about sharks as being dangerous, as being a threat to you and your family, and that's not really the case. And a big part of the reason why so many people are afraid of sharks is inflammatory media coverage and one particular scary movie, Jaws, which celebrated its 50th anniversary this past summer. I got to go see it and actually got to march in a Labor Day parade with our local cinema that had a Jaws themed float at the parade called You're Going to Need a Bigger Float. But there's something called the Jaws effect in public policy literature, which explains how fictional portrayals of real-world issues affect what voters and citizens really think about that issue and what policy preferences they support. Another example of this is the television show CSI, Crime Scene Investigators, in which every week there was rock solid slam dunk evidence, that clear unequivocal science showing who was guilty or innocent. And that has severely disrupted jury trials and the criminal defense system in the US because that's not really how it works. So sharks again are not really a threat to you or your family. Every once in a while, someone is injured. Every once in a while, someone is even killed, and that's a tragedy, and I don't want to minimize that. But I'm a policy guy, and when we talk about policy, we need to weigh the relative pros and cons of things. So, how big of a threat are sharks? Well, in a typical year, more humans are killed being hit on the head by flower pots as they walk down a street. As a social media guy, I love this one. More people in a typical year die falling off cliffs while trying to take a selfie of the scenery behind them than are killed by sharks. More people are bitten by other people on the New York City subway system each year than are bitten by sharks in the whole world. It is not something that you need to worry about. But not only are sharks not bad, sharks are actively good. They help keep the food web in balance. And when we're talking about our oceans, these are food webs that billions with a B of humans depend on for food, including many of the poorest humans in the world. If we want to have a healthy ocean food chain, we need to protect the top of the food chain because there's something in ecology called top-down control. It basically means when you lose top predators, the whole system can unravel more than you might expect, and sometimes in quite unpredictable ways. Unfortunately, many species of sharks are threatened. They face very, very serious conservation challenges. And the problem is so bad and has gotten worse so fast that this infographic that I helped the IUCN Red List make 10 years ago is already out of date. It's already worse than this. This infographic says that a quarter of sharks and their relatives are threatened with extinction. It's now closer to a third. The number one threat, by far, so much that there's not really a number two threat, is unsustainable fishing practices. And I want to be clear here that I am not just saying shark finning and shark fin soup, which tends to be the only threat to sharks that many people have heard of. Uh, in fact, over the last 20 years, this is from these quotations and statistics are from a recent United Nations report of consumption and trade in shark fins have declined dramatically. But you might be thinking, that's good. This is the threat to sharks that I've heard of, and it's declining dramatically. Sharks must be doing great. But remember, I just said that they're not, that it's getting worse. So what's happening now? We are dealing with the shark meat trade, people eating shark meat. And this is it is important to stress here that this involves different species of sharks. It involves different fishing countries. It involves different end markets, countries that buy the shark meat. So focusing your energy entirely on shark finning and the shark fin trade ignores a larger and growing threat. It's not like advocating against shark finning will stop this because it's a different problem involving different species, different fishing vessels. I have also dealt with some environmental activists who have told me that a bowl of shark fin soup, that's evil, that's vile, that's repulsive. Whereas that, a grilled shark steak, that's fine because that's how normal people eat fish. Other than the fact that that makes no sense from a conservation perspective, either way, that's a dead shark. It's also super racist. So it's important to remember in any environmental story who is portrayed as the good guy and the bad guy. You can be forgiven for not knowing this. We did a media content and discourse analysis. A lot of my work recently has been trying to understand where do people learn the things they think they know about the ocean, and are those sources of information accurate? We found that shark in English-speaking newspaper coverage, the shark finning and the shark fin trade was mentioned 6 times as often as the shark meat trade, even though, again, the shark meat trade is a larger and more rapidly growing threat that is primarily based in the English-speaking world. Another important thing that I've learned is that while those statistics are scary, uh, all hope is not lost. We know how to save sharks. We know what works. We know that it works. We know when we need people's help. So a lot of what I do has to do with conservation policy and using scientific evidence in support of wise conservation policy. So as an interdisciplinary conservation scientist, I spent a lot of my time thinking about this diagram of the science policy interface, which is a way of thinking about how does scientific data influence policy change and what steps does it go through along the way. In this simplified case, there's some sort of environmental problem. It's documented and described by scientists who likely propose some suite of possible solutions. This leads to the public learning about it and getting concerned, which leads to advocacy, which leads to policy change. And it's almost never exactly that simple, though some things work almost exactly like this. Even so, there's value in thinking about it this way. You can think of this as almost a null hypothesis of policy change, in that if the end result doesn't look like this, maybe something has gone wrong. So when we're talking about different policy tools available for sharks, remember the number one threat to sharks by far is unsustainable fishing practices. And there's two main families of policy solutions that aim to deal with this. The first is the so-called target-based policy tools, which say unsustainable overfishing is bad. Let's make the fishing more sustainable, but still allow fishing. And these are things like size limits. If it's too small, you throw it back. Quotas, you can only catch this many. If you're familiar with any fishing at all, you're probably familiar with these. But in recent years, there's been this new suite of policy tools, the limit-based policy tools, which say, no, we need to ban all shark fishing. We need to ban all trade in shark products. These are things like bans on the sale of shark fins or bans on shark fishing, shark sanctuaries. So anyone who took an environmental science class at any point in your career knows that this is not a new idea. This is an old argument. This is Muir versus Pinchot, conservation versus preservation. These people, these gentlemen are the founders of the U.S. Forest Service and the U.S. National Park Service, and they had heated debates about how we should protect the natural resources of the early United States. With some saying just leave it alone, leave it as wilderness, and some saying manage it for human benefit. So I think most Westerners would probably agree that the great whales are wilderness that should be preserved, wilderness and wildlife, whereas anchovies, sure, fine, that's a natural resource to be sustainably exploited. But sharks sort of fall awkwardly in the middle here, with some people feeling very, very, very strongly that they're on one side of this versus the other, which makes this a really fascinating space for me to work in as an interdisciplinary conservation scientist. If you've never before heard that sustainable fisheries for sharks exist or are a popular policy tool, despite considering yourself pretty knowledgeable about conservation issues, I invite you to look at some of our research in which I surveyed in which I surveyed experts around the world. 90% of all the shark scientists believe that sustainable fisheries management, not bans on fishing or trade in shark products, should be the goal. 90% of the experts. I also asked people who are environmental nonprofit employees, and 78% of environmental nonprofit employees agree the goal should be sustainable fisheries management, not total bans. And if you've only ever heard of total bans and not sustainable fisheries management, despite clear, huge majorities of experts supporting the other tool, I invite you to consider where you're getting your information from. I also note here that among the environmental advocacy community, the variable that explains the responses to do I prefer a total ban versus do I prefer sustainable fisheries the most is how often do those environmental advocates read the peer-reviewed scientific journal literature? Because environmentalists who regularly read the peer-reviewed scientific journal literature, 90% of them prefer sustainable fisheries, just like scientists. But among those who rarely or never read the peer-reviewed scientific journal literature, it's about 50-50. So the people who are better informed about on-the-ground details have a clear policy preference. What about shark fin trade bans specifically? This is a tool that gained a lot of momentum in the United States over the last 10 years. I and many other scientists spoke out against it. It did end up passing, though who knows what's going on with environmental policy in DC these days. But banning the sale of shark fins within the U.S., there was this really interesting pattern that respondents or environmentalists who believe that sustainable fisheries do exist in the world today, only about 25% of them supported these shark fin trade bans, whereas respondents who do not believe that sustainable shark fisheries exist in the world today, 100% of them support shark fin trade bans. And that makes sense. If you don't think something's possible and you don't think it's ever been successfully accomplished, of course you don't support it. But a thing I want to stress here is it is unequivocal and undeniable that sustainable shark fisheries exist in the world today by any definition of sustainable fisheries, which means these people are factually wrong about a foundational issue. And I love this graph. It's one of my favorite graphs that I've ever made. I am not claiming that everyone who disagrees with me is wrong, and I would never claim that. But everyone who is factually wrong disagrees with me, and that is almost as satisfying to say. So in the US, the people who help make this possible, that protect endangered species in the ocean and manage our sustainable fisheries are NOAA. NOAA is very much in the political crosshairs at the moment. I am checking news alerts constantly as Congress debates budget for next year. But if you want to learn more about this, I wrote this article about all the amazing stuff NOAA does for the Union of Concerned Scientists early this year. Sustainable shark fisheries in the U.S. indeed do exist thanks to NOAA. NOAA actually put out the press release about this about 5 years ago. And as an amateur home cook, I did not think this would how I would end up getting quoted in Food and Wine magazine, but it totally counts. I've been quoted in Food and Wine magazine. Uh, Another thing that's important to stress here is that lots of people want to help. Lots of people are trying to help, and that's great. But trying to help is not the same thing as actually helping. Thanks to science, we know whether or not a particular intervention can actually work or not. We don't have to guess. We don't need non-expert amateurs who are well-intentioned or not to try to reinvent the wheel on their own. We know what works. We know what doesn't work. We know what cannot possibly work. So lots of people are well-intentioned, but not especially well-informed about these issues. Those people need to, if they really want to help, if they're more interested in doing something that helps, they should listen to experts about where their help is needed. There are also unscrupulous people who participate in absolutely what I would call fraud, who exploit this dynamic. And I have colleagues who study misinformation and disinformation in far more controversial fields, things like climate change and GMO foods and microplastics and artificial intelligence. And they're shocked at how much nonsense is regularly shared about sharks. If you care about solving a problem, you should listen to people who understand the problem, and you should not guess how to solve it. I expect if you were walking down the street and saw a locksmith trying to open a combination lock, you would not walk up to them and say, "Have you tried 23?" Because of course you wouldn't. That doesn't make any sense. That is the same thing that lots of these people are doing with conservation policy. I'm not going to get too much into the weeds here with what is and is not meant by the term shark finning, but as one example here, this was the most shared ocean conservation photo in I think 2017, and it went viral with a caption about how shark finning is bad and we need to stop shark finning. What is happening in this photo is unequivocally not shark finning. If we banned shark finning, it would not ban this because this is not shark finning. Millions of people saw this image. And only less than 1% of that saw the expert community explaining, yes, this is a problem, but you're misdiagnosing it and calling for solutions that don't make any sense. There's also an example of wanting to help that's not helping, of this one small nonprofit that targets well-known, often beloved brands that have a very, very, very tenuous connection to the shark fin trade, and they stage these flashy graphics and online campaigns. These consumer boycotts of corporations got more media coverage than all sustainable fisheries management tools combined in that earlier media content and discourse study that I mentioned, despite the fact that they make no sense and can't possibly help, unlike these, which are widely supported by experts and evidence. And you may be wondering, I know I was, what the hell does Starbucks have to do with the shark fin trade? Well, the answer is when Starbucks sells their coffee in Southeast Asia, they have to use a food importer, exporter, distributor, like literally any food company does when they go internationally. The food importer, exporter, distributor that Starbucks uses is owned by a holding company, which is owned by another holding company that collectively owns hundreds of food-related businesses. One of those is a restaurant that serves shark fin soup in Hong Kong. So, that is why we are blaming Starbucks for the shark fin trade. This is nonsense, and it does not help anyone or anything. There are also people who uh, there are people in what I call the macho cowboy idiot scuba diver community. I'm trying to get this term into the peer-reviewed scientific journal literature. It is notably a gender-neutral term, and many of the worst offenders are women. But there are people who grab sharks and ride sharks and hug sharks, and they say, I'm doing conservation. And I don't know what the hell is happening in this photo, but it is not conservation by any definition. This is bad. Don't do this. Don't support people who do this. There are also these goofy online petitions, like this one, to ban the practice of shark finning in the state of Florida. That this is from 3 years ago. At the time, 60,000 people signed this petition to ban shark finning in Florida. And not one of those 60,000 people was apparently aware that we banned shark finning in Florida in 1993. This is a petition that cannot possibly accomplish its stated goal because its stated goal was accomplished before the person who made the petition was born. And I don't necessarily expect everyone in the world to understand every nuance of fisheries management policy, but if you don't, maybe you shouldn't lead a huge public-facing campaign about it. I don't think that's being unreasonable here. So again, the book that I wrote about this topic is Why Sharks Matter. There are lots of shark books. If you can see the shelf behind me, I have probably 50 of them here. There are more, but there's never been a book like Why Sharks Matter before. And there are many books that are very, very public facing. They're sort of a list of fun facts or pretty pictures about sharks. And then on the last page, it says, oh, by the way, sharks are in trouble. Don't eat shark fin soup, which most people are already not doing. Or there's textbooks that are written for people who have a PhD or are in law school. And there's never been anything that's threaded this needle that tries to take the rigor of academia and academic research, but presenting it in a way that a member of the public can follow along and understand and learn something. And I've been thrilled with the reception to this so far. Uh, I have traveled around the world talking about it, which has been really neat. I have a slide coming up on that in a bit. But if anyone on this call is interested, if you're taking my shark class, this is one of the textbooks for it. But if anyone else who is watching is interested, I would be very happy to send you a signed book plate. If you reach out to me, if you get a copy of the book from your favorite local bookstore, reach out. I will send you a signed book plate, which is a sticker that goes in the front. So, some things that you can do to actually help save sharks and save the ocean in general. The number one threat facing sharks and also facing whales and sea turtles and all sorts of stuff is unsustainable fishing practices. In fact, this is the subject of my second book that is currently undergoing review with the publisher. So, don't eat unsustainable seafood. Don't buy it. Don't order it. And notice I'm not saying we all need to become vegan and give up fish entirely. You certainly can do that if you want, but we are not at the point where the science says we all have to give up seafood or the ocean is doomed, and people claiming otherwise are not telling you the truth. Donating time or money to reputable nonprofits is a really important thing to do, and also not supporting these fraudulent nonprofits. Writing to your elected officials is important, and learning more and spreading the word is really important. Just make sure that what you're learning is accurate. And a great way to do that is follow me on social media, again, at Why Sharks Matter. I regularly share updates from a wide variety of trusted sources, as well as my own thoughts on things. So, as I mentioned, I have been traveling around the world talking about sharks. I will happily go anywhere in person or virtually. If you have an audience and a speaker budget, I'm also always happy to zoom into public school, science classrooms, or clubs. Never a charge for public schools. And I take people on shark research expeditions. Some of you on this call are joining me on for the field component of my Center for Wildlife Studies course, but we also have started doing these fundraiser charter trips where if you bring me a group of people of up to 15 people who all have to be at least 16 years old, I will take you on a shark research trip out of Florida and you will get to get up close and personal with sharks. Happy to chat more about that later. Before I wrap up here, I have some folks to thank. I want to thank Jack, Emily, and Jeff from the Center for Wildlife Studies for bringing me on board as part of the team and arranging this talk tonight. I want to thank my family for always supporting this crazy career of mine. When I was 5 years old, I told my parents I want to be a marine biologist, and my dad said, I have no idea what that is, but I'll find out. And now he's retired and he takes his golf buddies on shark research trips with me. I want to thank my publisher, Johns Hopkins University Press, friends and colleagues for years of listening to me talk about my vision for another type of shark book. And finally, I want to thank you for listening. I love talking about this stuff, as I hope you can tell, but I couldn't do it if no one was here to listen. Before I wrap up and take any questions, and again, I'm happy to answer any questions that you want to know about anything I talked about tonight, or marine biology, or ocean conservation, or the two courses that I'm teaching for Center for Wildlife Studies, or anything at all. Before I do that, I just want to share a quick funny story here. That in 2019, I was a sponsor of the Sigma Xi conference, which was basically a national science fair. And I had this Ask Me Anything About Sharks booth at the convention center. And we opened it up to the public and advertised in the local paper. And for 3 days, people walked in and were asking me questions about sharks. It was awesome. And at one point, I got up to go to the bathroom and I came back to my seat, and there was a 10-year-old boy sitting in that chair answering people's questions about sharks. So I am optimistic that if I keep doing these talks, eventually I will be able to retire because I will find someone who can take over for me. But in the meantime, I am having a blast, and I thank you very much for listening. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and I'm happy to answer your questions. What can I answer for you today?
I have a quick question, if that's okay.
Please.
Awesome. Well, I'm taking your course,
Wonderful. The field component, the lecture, or both?
both. I'm on
Wonderful.
the wait list for the field component, so
Okay.
hoping I get in, but if not, later. Thank you so much for your talk. It was so interesting. I'm really into ecotourism, and I'm also a free diver.
Hmm.
So I was just curious. You had the example of like the people who are feeding the sharks.
Yeah, there's real problems in this space.
Yeah, I was curious because I know a couple people in the space who do that. Is there any scientific research or evidence that suggests like feeding sharks in that way kind of like affects their behavior or affects their migratory
Yes.
pattern? I assumed, yeah.
Yes, unfortunately that can. So as with any sort of interactions with wildlife, the answer is always going to be it depends. In some cases, there's shark feeding dives can be done in such a way that it does not disrupt the biology or physiology or behavior of the animals, but it often isn't. And there have been studies that sharks are more stressed because of this, because they're aggregating in large groups when they normally wouldn't be, and they're fighting for food when normally they'd be spread out. They're not migrating when they should be because they're hanging out by this steady food source that normally wouldn't be there. So this can be a real problem.
How would you recommend like feeding in a good way that wouldn't affect their migratory patterns?
It's hard. So I'll tell you, I don't do those. I love diving with sharks, but I love going diving and seeing a shark versus doing a baited shark dive. So
Okay.
it is tricky.
Yeah, totally. Thank you.
Sure.
So we've got a question in the chat.
Yes, I see a question from Cal here. Uh, so the question has to do with shark finning and the apparent wastefulness. So as I briefly mentioned here, but didn't in the talk, but didn't go into a lot of detail about. So shark finning, what that means is it is catching a shark, cutting the fins of the shark off, and dumping the carcass at sea. This is done because pound for pound, even though the shark meat trade is more valuable, a pound of shark fin is worth more than a pound of shark meat. There's just not as many fins on a shark. So if you have limited space in your cargo hold, you want to fill it up with the valuable stuff. And that's absolutely wasteful as well as wildly inhumane. It's also not happening very much anymore. There are a few places where it's still happening, but it is 10% of the problem that it was 20 years ago. And that's in some cases because of successful advocacy. So I am baffled why so many environmental groups aren't taking the win here and taking credit for making real positive change. So it is absolutely managed. So how is this managed in sustainable fisheries? Finning not allowed. That's it. If you catch a shark and you're going to kill it, it has to be of legal size and of a species that's allowed, and you have to bring the whole shark to shore and use all of it, not just the fins. So that's what that photo was. There's all the sharks were on shore, meaning finning did not take place. This gets very legalese very quickly, but that's a quick summary here. Okay, I see a question from Rebecca in the chat here. If you actually wanted to uh, yeah, Cal, it's weird that no one's talking about how wildly successful this has been. If I have conversations with people who consider themselves well informed about shark conservation topics, and they seem to think that it's still the end of the world with shark finning, and like we did it, we won this fight, but there's still another fight. So I need don't give up, but don't pretend like we haven't made huge progress. So Rebecca, if you're interested in marine science research in general, the best place to look is other than Facebook groups like the Marine Biology Career Network, where there's 20 jobs a day posted. There's also the Schmidt Marine Jobs Board. I'll put it in the chat. Um, the and there's thousands of jobs on the Schmidt Marine Jobs Board. If you are interested in sharks and rays specifically, I would encourage you to join the American Elasmobranch Society. It is our field's professional scientific society. We have a conference every year. Next year, it's in New Orleans, which should be a lot of fun. Next year also is a once every 4 years conference called Sharks International, which is going to be in Colombo, Sri Lanka. So I'm very excited for both of those locations. I go to way too many conferences. It will be, I think, 14 this year. Um, and they are not always in exciting locations. So I'm excited for New Orleans and Sri Lanka. What else can I answer for folks? Happy to answer anything at all about the content I shared with you tonight, about the upcoming courses, about the sort of work that I do, anything, sharks in general, marine biology in general. I'm happy to help. Question about whale sharks. Yeah, they often these animals will be seen in mixed species schools, and it's because there are some species that will actually use sharks as shelter, especially a large shark like a whale shark. Uh, a species will just hang out by them and then hope that I'm hiding, the bigger predators can't see me. But also, the whale sharks find food of the sort that the other animals want. Related to that, a very dangerous piece of advice that gets shared as misinformation is if you're worried about sharks at the beach, just go in the water whenever you see dolphins because everyone knows sharks are afraid of dolphins. Nonsense. Sharks and dolphins eat the same stuff. They leave each other alone. And if you see dolphins feeding, there are definitely sharks feeding below them. So seeing dolphins is a great reason to not go in the water.
I have to add a little anecdote to that, not about sharks, unfortunately, but as a terrestrial predator guy, I often ask students if they can tell me how many fatal attacks by wolves on humans in North America in the last 400 years or so. And I've been everything from 0 to 2,000 a year.
Yep.
And the correct number is 2
Yep.
recorded
Very similar to sharks.
by wild wolves, not hybrids or anything, but that's just a fascinating statistic and how they've been demonized for centuries. But
Yeah. So Paige is asking about how do you determine if the seafood that you're using is that you're considering buying is sustainable? That's a great question and something I meant to say. So thank you for the reminder. I just wrote a whole book about this. And it will be available for sale in the spring. But the short answer in the meantime is if you are in the United States, a really excellent resource for this is Monterey Bay Aquarium Seafood Watch. There are regional guides as well as a national guide, and it lists all of the commonly available seafood in your area and sorts it into green list, which is this is environmentally friendly, yellow list, which is every once in a while it's okay, and red list, which is this is a problem, maybe order the chicken. Question from Libby. Yes, please do not touch wildlife ever. The people who are doing this are bad. They are not good people. They are not helping. Do not pet wildlife.
or feed in general.
Or feed, yes. How are shark tournaments allowed? Well, any sort of tournament has to follow standard fisheries management rules, which means there are some species you're not allowed to catch and kill. Mako tournaments in the US are not happening anymore because Makos are protected now. They were happening relatively recently, but in other places they might still be. But any sort of fishing tournament needs to follow basic fisheries management rules, including these species are protected, you cannot kill them. So again, I'm teaching 2 courses with Center for Wildlife Studies. Jeff has been putting the links in the chat here. I'm teaching a biology and ecology of sharks and rays course that includes an optional field research experience where you will live on a research vessel with me in Florida and help study sharks. That is full, but there's a wait list. And I think we're going to open a third time slot for that probably in the early spring. And I'm also teaching a how to communicate science using social media course that is entirely online.
And as Dave mentioned, I just added a link to our overall course listings at CWS, which we're adding classes on a regular basis. They're typically offered every quarter, every term. But please take a look. We'll try to announce them as new courses are offered, and new offerings are provided, changing all the time.
How do you sign up for the field course waitlist? I believe there's a direct link from the class, but if not, there's an email address on there for the generic Center for Wildlife Studies. Just sort of help and say that you came to the talk and are interested in the wait list because it does look like there's enough interest that we'll be able to offer a third time slot for it. Thanks, Jeff. All right. Anything else that I can answer for anyone here? And again, you can always find me at Why Sharks Matter on social media if a question comes up later. What is my favorite shark? That's a great question to end with. My favorite shark is the sandbar shark. You can follow hashtag #BestShark on social media and learn all about them. But they are, if you ever go to an aquarium, they're likely in there. I love my sandbar sharks.
That is a good way to wrap things up. Like Dave said,
All
if you
right.
have other questions, feel free to reach out to him directly about shark questions, or to any of us at CWS. If you have questions, recommendations for other presentations you might like to see, other courses. I put postings earlier, links earlier for the recordings of these talks, which we post on our YouTube playlist. I'll probably get this posted within a day or two. And we're always adding new talks. Next month, we're having Dr. Elsa Anderson present on how, say, urban gardens can help contribute to biodiversity, which would be also a very interesting topic for many of us. But with that, I think, David, thank you again for joining us, and thank everyone for joining in today. I'm sure I know I learned a ton. It's always the highlight of my week when I get to sit in on these. And we look forward to hearing more about your classes and following you online.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your night.